Hello, I'm Maurice Powell. Welcome to A Little Like Music, Manx Radio's regular Thursday evening classical music hour. How can I forget that? I must have said that introduction 1,000 times. Now, you'll have noticed that we weren't on air last Thursday. There was a vital, very important by-election, the details of which I regret to say I have forgotten. But we're back on air now with a vengeance, and we're going to concentrate tonight a little bit on one of Brahms' early orchestral works. I'm going to play a few bits and pieces throughout the programme. I don't think I've played anything from this particular work ever in the series, which is a shame, really, because it's definitely Brahms on the lighter side. It's some extracts from the Serenade No. 1 in D major. Brahms wrote 2 orchestral serenades. Brahms, of course, took a long time, over 20 years, mulling over his first symphony, which is a monumental work. Well, he took his time because basically he could see the shadow of Beethoven sort of looming over his shoulder. He didn't want to write a symphony and then have it immediately compared with Beethoven. Unfortunately, of course, when the first symphony was first produced, that is exactly what happened, and people began talking about Brahms' first symphony as Beethoven's 10th symphony and all that. But before he actually got round to producing this first symphony, he'd written a number of orchestral works. The best known is probably the so-called variations on a theme by Haydn, and also a very attractive overture. But the 2 serenades are in quite a different sort of genre. These are on the lighter side. This is sort of a rustic Brahms, really, almost bordering on sort of Dvorak in his most kind of open-air and pastoral style. The first serenade is a very, very attractive work. It apparently began life as a septet. In other words, a large-scale chamber work, but not an orchestral work at all. It's in 6 movements, but Brahms was persuaded to sort of beef it up a bit, to sort of increase the orchestration. He added a couple of horns and rewrote some bits to make it more of an orchestral work. The original version is lost. I've never heard it. I don't think the music exists now. Brahms probably destroyed it, as he did so much of his first efforts. However, 6 movements. Let's hear the opening movement. As I say, a very open-air, pastoral feel about this. If you know Brahms symphonies well, and most music lovers know at least 2 of them very well indeed, this might come as a bit of a surprise. The opening movement of Brahms' Serenade No. 1 in D major. And yes, the more I think about it, I'm reminded of Dvorak quite a bit. Because Brahms was a great champion of Dvorak, he clearly recognised a kindred spirit. And although very few of Dvorak's orchestral works have the kind of the weight, if you like, the rigour of Brahms' symphonies, he comes fairly close, of course, in works such as the Seventh Symphony in D minor. We'll return to this particular work a little bit later on. Right, let's have a little bit of British light music, a great contrast. This is a piece by Peter York, not a composer that's featured very often in this series. There's not a great deal of his music actually recorded or available. But he was kind of an apprentice, like many light music composers were, to the sort of the dance band world in the 20s and 30s. He was well known as an arranger and a composer on a small scale, and he formed the Peter York Concert Orchestra, which was heard quite often on BBC Radio. He died rather young, sadly, so perhaps, well before he reached sort of full maturity. However, he clearly had a fertile imagination. Here is a short piece of his called Fireflies. Fireflies by Peter York. Now, a bit of nostalgia. I'm going to, throughout this series, I'm going to introduce now, probably every week, something from the dim and distant past, performed by an artist, either an instrumentalist or a singer, someone that actually came here and performed in Douglas during the sort of the heyday, if you like, of the Manx tourist industry. A lot of these, of course, came in the 20s and 30s, but also for the first, certainly for the first decade after the Second World War. It must have seemed much like the old days, the good old days, for people coming on holiday here. Well, things changed after that because fashions changed. People had cars and didn't come to the Isle of Man anymore. They had televisions and didn't go to live theatre and variety shows quite as much as they did. And, of course, everything slid, if that's the right thing to say, away over a period of time. Not suddenly, there was no sudden crash, but there was a bit of a decline in the quantity and quality of the entertainments here in the summer. But in the 20s and 30s, it was very vibrant indeed. Now, one of the greatest artists, one of the greatest singers that came here twice in the 1930s was Paul Robeson. And, of course, he sang 2 programmes of spirituals and other things, and they were amongst the best concerts that have ever been produced here. The audience were just, listened in rapt silence to this wonderful, deep voice which filled the Villa Marina. And he was such an unassuming person. He sort of stood quietly by the piano, no histrionics, and just produced a stream of wonderful sound. Here is an example. Here is the spiritual Deep River, sung by Paul Robeson and recorded in 1939. So this gives us a very good idea of what his voice was like when he performed here a few years earlier. The voice of Paul Robeson, one of the most distinctive, finest voices in the whole history of singing, I imagine. And we're rather used to him singing the very deep basso profundo notes, aren't we? That's what he's kind of like famous for. But that particular recording shows that he had a very fine baritone range as well. As I say, he appeared here twice in the 1930s, and they were amongst the most memorable concerts, Sunday concerts ever during that wonderful period. So this perhaps just takes us back to Brahms and another movement from that lovely serenade that is one of his earliest orchestral works. I'm going to play the minuets. There are a pair of minuets just together. The whole thing lasts less than 4 minutes, and it is a completely relaxed style. again, the serenades were more leisurely, lighter in style than sort of overtures and other symphonic works. And this is a typical example. I think this gives an idea of what the original conception as a chamber work might have been like. There's no heavy orchestration here. This is almost music to drift off to. So if you're sitting listening and you have a glass of malt whiskey, or a glass of rum, or a gin and tonic, this could be just the music for you. Another movement there, a pair of charming minuets from Brahms' Serenade No. 1 in D major. Now, if you've tuned in, you're very, very welcome. You're listening to A Little Light Music with me, Maurice Powell. Now, just time to mention a very important concert this coming weekend. This is the gala concert of the Isle of Man Symphony Orchestra. And it basically features great British composers. There's music by Elgar and Walton, Delius, Vaughan Williams, and a little piece by Hayden Wood. I shall be conducting, and for me it's an important concert, but it's the last time that I shall have the privilege of conducting the Isle of Man Symphony Orchestra, something I've done for 20 years now, so I think it's probably time for a break. Let somebody else take over the baton. We want fresh ideas, and I'm sure the orchestra are fed up with seeing my face every week. But I think it's time to make a move. I shan't be retiring altogether, of course. I'm always available to take a rehearsal, or if necessary, and I shall continue to be on the committee of the orchestra, if they want me, that is, and to write their programme notes, which people have been very kind in saying that they've enjoyed reading over the years. Now, this coming concert, the main work in the first half is the cello concerto of Elgar, played by a wonderful Polish soloist who's played on the island before, Ewa Mizerska. We have music by Walton, of course, in the first half. Delius and Vaughan Williams, the variations for strings and harp on Dives and Lazarus, a lovely, lovely piece of English string music. And the main work in the second half is Elgar's amazing orchestral tone poem In the South. The leader of the orchestra on this occasion is Victoria Hope. I shall be conducting, as I said. Now then, the important information. Sunday the 24th of November, this coming Sunday at the Villa Marina in the Royal Hall at 2:30 p.m. Tickets are available at villagaiety.com, and you could also ring 600 555. So, it should be a wonderful concert, notwithstanding that for me, as I say, it's a rather special concert. It's going to be a wonderful concert. It's a feast of great British music. So, I hope to see as many of you there as possible, and don't forget, if you get the chance, come up and say hello. I'll be very pleased to see you. Where to now? Let's dip back into the 18th century to a gentler age. Well, I don't think so, really. It was the age that saw the execution of the French king and the start of Napoleon's antics around Europe. But nevertheless, I like to think of it as a gentler age than perhaps our own. We're going to hear music by Gretry. He was a composer who came in the generation after Rameau. He's really a classical contemporary of Haydn and Mozart and Beethoven, but he did follow in the footsteps of Rameau by writing a lot of operas and that peculiar French invention, the opera ballet, which is, as its name implies, part opera and part ballet. In fact, the dance sequences are amongst the most important parts of these operas. The one I'm going to take some extracts from today is called A Caravan to Cairo. It's an Eastern story. I won't go into the story, but a popular idea at the time. Witness Mozart's Seraglio, for example, and there's also The Pilgrims to Mecca by Gluck. Eastern stories or Middle Eastern stories were very, very popular. So, A Caravan to Cairo, about halfway through, there's a ballet sequence involving some French slaves, Italian slaves, a chorus, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to play just a little sequence of three pieces. First of all, an Egyptian march, and then a little song by one of the French slaves, and then a danse générale, just to give you a flavour of what this delightful music is like. That was the Egyptian march from a ballet sequence from the second act of Grétry's A Caravan to Cairo. Next little piece is the little cavatina, the little song of a French slave girl, in which she sings, "We were born to be slaves, for none of us are free in this universe. This is the fate of humanity, for even kings bear chains." Very philosophical and actually rather cheerful. She was just about to say, of all the masters that people serve, love seems to me to be the sweetest. So, one more short piece then. This is just a general dance for all the slave girls, which has a lovely part for harp. A final little dance there from Grétry's opera ballet A Caravan to Cairo. Very graceful and gentle music. very colourful composer, Gretry, and he did write some quite powerful operas as well as these lighter ones. Interesting composer. Now, a little bit more British-like music, I think, and we come to the music of Vivian Ellis. Now, he's best known for the Coronation Scot, which is perhaps the best piece of train music ever written. But he also wrote the song Spare a Little Happiness and the musical Bless the Bride. So he was a major figure in sort of a British musical theatre. Here's a piece called Muse in Mayfair, and this was the interlude music used for the spinning wheel, which you might remember. Charming piece there by Vivian Ellis, the composer of the Coronation Scot and Alpine Pastures and much else. The Muse in Mayfair. Let us return very briefly to our Brahms Serenade, and we've reached the Scherzo, which features a very fine solo for the horn. As I say, this is probably one of the least touched up movements. Remember I said at the beginning that Brahms probably intended this work as a chamber work, but was encouraged to sort of beef up the orchestration and to make it more of an orchestral work. But this has something of the original feel about it. The Scherzo then from Brahms' Serenade No. 1 in D major. Well, a rather robust and rustic scherzo there from the Brahms Serenade No. 1 in D major, featuring the horns there quite prominently. And now, just in case the choral singers amongst you were thinking you've been neglected this week, I'm going to play two short extracts from a very little-known choral work of Vivaldi. This is the Dixit Dominus. I say it's very little known. In fact, nobody knew it existed until it was discovered, I think, in the Dresden State Library in 2005. It was almost certainly written in the 1720s. And somehow the court at Dresden acquired it sometime in the 1750s when they were reorganising their court library and started to purchase a good deal of music from all over Europe, including some of Vivaldi's music. Vivaldi, of course, knew the Dresden court and its orchestra very well because he had already written some very fine concertos for them. The Dresden court was one of the finest in Europe. A very luxurious place, lots of money to spend, and of course the orchestra was filled with wonderful players. Vivaldi, must have felt he'd died and woken up in a sort of a musical heaven when he come across the Dresden orchestra, and they were famous. Telemann admired them. Bach would dearly have loved to work at Dresden, but got stuck in Leipzig instead. So, lots of history there between Vivaldi and Dresden. So here are two choruses then from this little-known Dixit Dominus, the opening chorus, Dixit Dominus, and the final chorus, Et in Secula Seculorum. That was the opening chorus from Vivaldi's little-known Dixit Dominus, and now I did promise you a second chorus, but time has proved to be the enemy on this occasion. Now, I will include another extract or two from this wonderful piece and the final chorus in the next programme. That's an absolute promise. I'm sorry about that, but it's nearly time to go to our play out, which I'm going to turn to the last movement of the Brahms Serenade that we've been hearing snatches of. And we've enjoyed that. It's a slightly different sort of programme, but these sort of lesser-known works by the great composers, I mean, they just stay lesser-known unless somebody digs them out and plays them. But I hope you think it's well worth listening to some little-known Brahms. Now, final reminder about Sunday the 24th, the Isle of Man Symphony Orchestra Gala concert, my last concert with them, 2:30 at the Royal Hall of Villa Marina. I believe tickets are going very well, but I'm sure if you give them a call, they'll squeeze you in somewhere. Please join me next Thursday. I'm not quite sure what's in the programme, but you already know there's going to be some Vivaldi, so perhaps I'll find one of those wonderful concertos that he wrote for the fantastic Dresden Orchestra as well. So, here we go then. Here is another extract from the Brahms Serenade, part of the wonderful finale. So, please join me again next Thursday. In the meantime, goodbye.